At our family dinner, my husband told everyone he was divorcing me for my sister. They'd been having an affair for years. I just nodded and said, "Please check your emails right now." The look on their faces when they realized. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. It's taken me a while to get to a place where I could even talk about this. For the longest time, the words were just stuck in my throat, a heavy lump of betrayal and pain. But I know some of you out there might be going through your own silent battles, and maybe, just maybe, my story can give you a little bit of strength. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. My name is Lorraine. I'm a digital forensics specialist, which is a fancy way of saying my job is to find the truth hidden in computers and phones. I piece together digital lives, follow electronic footprints. I'm good at it because I'm methodical, I'm patient, and I see the patterns others miss. I never, in a million years, thought my greatest case would be my own marriage. It all came to a head on a crisp Sunday evening in October, at my father's 65th birthday dinner. The house was filled with that familiar, comforting chaos of a family gathering. The rich smell of my mother's pot roast hung in the air, mingling with the scent of the birthday cake I'd baked sitting on the counter. Laughter spilled from the living room where my cousins were watching the game, and the low murmur of conversation was a symphony I'd known my whole life. It was a perfect picture of family, of normalcy. A perfect lie. I remember watching my husband, Walter, from across the crowded dining table. He was a pediatric anesthesiologist, a good man, a compassionate man, or so I'd believed for 7 years. He was charming everyone, as he always did, telling a story about a surgery that had the whole table captivated. Then, he picked up his spoon and tapped it gently against his wine glass. A clear, ringing sound that cut through the noise. "I have an announcement to make," he said. The chatter died down instantly. I turned to him. I watched his face carefully, my professional habits kicking in even in a moment like this. I noted the slight tremor in his hand as he set the spoon down. I saw the way his eyes darted, just for a fraction of a second, toward my younger sister, Diane, before settling somewhere above everyone's heads, on the far wall. My heart didn't race. It beat a slow, steady, heavy rhythm in my chest, a drumbeat of knowledge I had been carrying alone for 6 agonizing months. Walter took a breath, his voice growing firmer, rehearsed. "Vivian and I are getting divorced." A collective gasp went around the table. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My Aunt Patricia whispered, "Oh, honey." My father's bushy eyebrows drew together, his expression a mask of confusion. "I hadn't planned to announce it this way," Walter continued, playing the part of the reluctant, pained husband. "But since everyone's together." He let the sentence hang in the air, letting the shock settle. Then, he delivered the final, devastating blow. "There's more," he added. He reached across the table, past the bread basket and the gravy boat, and took Diane's hand. "My sister. My restless, beautiful, younger sister. Diane and I have fallen in love." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so complete, you could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. It was broken only by my mother's whispered, horrified, "Oh my God." And then, every single eye in that room turned to me. They were waiting. Waiting for the explosion. The tears, the screaming, the accusations. Maybe the dramatic throwing of my mother's good china against the wall. They were waiting for me to play my part in their carefully constructed narrative, the blindsided, hysterical, heartbroken wife. But I didn't give them that satisfaction. Instead, I held their gazes, one by one. I nodded calmly, took a sip of my water, and said the 9 words that would bring their entire world crashing down around them. "Please, everyone, check your emails right now." Walter's confident smile faltered. Confusion flickered across his face. "Emails?" he asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "What emails?" "I sent them just before dinner," I replied, my voice even, pulling out my own phone. Everyone should have received them by now. And just like that, the story they thought they were telling was no longer theirs. It was mine. It's funny how the human mind works. In that silent, stunned room, as my family hesitantly reached for their phones, my mind didn't stay there. It drifted back 8 years, to a charity fundraiser for the Seattle Children's Hospital. The ballroom was glittering, full of important people in expensive clothes. I was there representing my cybersecurity firm, which had just donated a new security system to the hospital. And he was there, Walter, looking handsome and a little out of place in his tuxedo. He wasn't schmoozing with the donors. He was in a quiet corner, talking to a little girl in a wheelchair, making her laugh so hard she snorted. He had this light about him. A genuine kindness that felt rare and real. He told me he was a pediatric anesthesiologist. He put children to sleep before surgery, held their hands, and was the first face they saw when they woke up. How could you not fall for a man like that? Our connection was immediate, intense. We talked for hours that night, about everything and nothing. A year later, we were married in a small, beautiful ceremony in my parents' backyard, under the old oak tree I used to climb as a child. Those first few years were beautiful. They were the kind of years you see in movies and think, that can't be real. We bought a fixer-upper, a little craftsman bungalow in Queen Anne, and spent every weekend covered in paint and sawdust, renovating it together. We'd argue over paint colors and laugh until our sides hurt. He had a demanding work schedule, the long hours of a doctor, but he always made time for us. I remember one time I was having a terrible week at work. A big case was going nowhere, and I was feeling completely defeated. I came home late on a Friday, exhausted and ready to just collapse. The house was dark, and for a second, my heart sank, thinking he wasn't home. But then I saw it. A trail of candles leading from the front door, through the living room, and out to the back porch. He had set up a blanket, pillows, and a telescope. He packed a picnic basket with my favorite wine and cheese. We spent the whole night under the stars, and he just held me and listened. He didn't try to fix my problems, he just shared the weight of them. He left little notes in my laptop bag. "Have a great day, I love you." He'd make these elaborate Sunday breakfasts, his terrible singing echoing through the house as he flipped pancakes. I had never felt more secure, more cherished, or more deeply loved in my entire life. That was the man I married. That was the life he and I built. And that was the memory I held onto, the foundation I thought was made of solid rock, but was really just built on sand. The first crack in that foundation appeared 3 years ago. It didn't look like a crack at the time. It looked like family. My sister, Diane, had always been the restless one. While I was busy building a career and a stable life, she was drifting. She dropped out of college twice, moved between cities, Portland, Denver, Austin, and changed career paths with dizzying frequency. She was always searching for something, but she never seemed to find it. So when she called me, crying, from a bus station in Denver after another failed attempt at finding herself, my heart went out to her. She was broke, alone, and defeated. "Just come home," I told her. "Come to Seattle. You can stay with us until you get back on your feet." I remember bringing it up with Walter that night. He was hesitant, and I should have paid more attention to that. He was sitting at the kitchen island, looking through some medical journals. "Are you sure, Lorraine?" he asked, not looking up. "Having someone else in the house, even your sister, it might change our dynamic." "She's my sister, Walt," I replied, a little defensively. "She's got nowhere else to go. Family helps family. It'll just be for a couple of months." He finally looked at me and gave me that warm smile that always melted my resolve. "Okay," he said. "Of course. Whatever you think is best." What was meant to be a 2-month stay stretched into 6. Diane quickly found a job working at a local art gallery, but she claimed she just couldn't afford Seattle's insane rental prices on her meager salary. "I'm saving up, Lori, I promise," she'd say. just a little bit longer. And honestly, at first, I didn't mind. I'd always wanted to be closer to my sister. With our busy lives, we'd grown distant. Her presence seemed to fill a space in our home I hadn't even realized was empty. Her bubbly, chaotic energy was a contrast to my quiet, methodical nature. It felt lively. For a little while, it felt like we were a real, bustling family. I was so happy to have my sister back. I was so naive. I had welcomed the serpent right into my own home. Looking back is a special kind of torture, isn't it? You see everything so clearly. All the little signs, the red flags you dismissed as nothing, suddenly line up like soldiers in a row, pointing directly at the ugly truth. After Diane moved in, things started to change, but it was so slow, so insidious, that I didn't notice. Walter began working later shifts. An emergency surgery, a complicated case, a last-minute consultation. I was married to a doctor, long hours were part of the deal. I never questioned it. I'd just leave a plate of dinner for him in the oven and go to bed. Diane would run errands that took hours longer than they should have. A trip to the grocery store would turn into a 3-hour affair. "Oh, I ran into an old friend," she'd say brightly, her cheeks flushed. They developed inside jokes, little phrases and shared glances across the dinner table that I wasn't a part of. Sometimes, I'd walk into the living room and find them talking, only for them to fall silent the moment they saw me. The air would feel tense, charged, as if I had interrupted something private. When I'd ask what they were talking about, it was always the same vague answer, "Oh, nothing important." I remember one family barbecue in our backyard. My mom pulled me aside in the kitchen as I was getting more potato salad. She was looking out the window, a thoughtful frown on her face. "You know," she said quietly, "Walter and Diane seem to get along really well." I glanced outside. Walter was helping Diane set up the badminton net. He was laughing, his hand resting on her arm as he showed her how to hold the racket. "Why wouldn't they?" I replied, genuinely puzzled. "It's nice, right?" "Of course, it's nice," Mom shrugged. "Some men just don't get along with their in-laws." "You're lucky." Lucky. I thought I was lucky. My husband and my sister had become friends. Our house felt more alive. Even my best friend, Sharon, saw it. We were having lunch one day, and my phone buzzed. It was Diane, calling Walter's phone which he'd accidentally left in my car. It was the third time she'd called him that morning for some trivial reason. Sharon watched me answer, a skeptical look on her face. After I hung up, she stirred her iced tea and said, "Lorraine, be careful." "Careful of what?" I laughed. "I wouldn't let my sister get that comfortable with my husband," she said bluntly. I was almost offended. "Sharon, it's not like that. Diane's just needy. She looks up to him. Besides, it's Walter." The implication was clear. Walter would never betray me. He was too honest, too devoted, too good. I told myself not to be the paranoid, jealous wife. If he and Diane fell silent when I entered a room, it was a coincidence. If he quickly put his phone away when a text came in, it was just a work thing he didn't want to bore me with. Trust, after all, was the foundation of our marriage. I clung to that trust like a life raft, completely unaware that I was already drowning. The discovery came by accident. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a gut feeling. It was mundane. It was a Tuesday night, 6 months before that fateful family dinner. Walter was on call at the hospital, and I was working from home, trying to finish up a report. I decided to order some takeout, but my phone was dead. I grabbed Walter's laptop from his study, thinking nothing of it. I opened the browser. It was set to automatically restore his previous session. And there it was. His personal email account, open on the screen. I wasn't looking for anything. I had no suspicions compelling me to snoop. My finger was already hovering over the trackpad to close the window. But a subject line caught my eye. It was from Diane. The subject was simply, "Tonight." My blood went cold. Against every rational thought in my head, I clicked on it. And my world, the solid, stable world I had so carefully built, shattered into a million pieces. The email was explicit. Unambiguous. "Last night was amazing," Diane had written. "I can't stop thinking about you. I can still feel your hands on me." I felt the air leave my lungs. My vision tunneled. I scrolled down. There was his reply, sent from his phone earlier that day. "We need to be more careful," Walter had written. "I don't want to hurt Lori. But I can't stop thinking about you either." I kept scrolling. I read through the entire thread with a strange, horrifying detachment, as if I were examining evidence for a case at work rather than witnessing the collapse of my own life. The emails stretched back over 2 years. 2 years. Before she had even moved in with us. While she was in Denver, they were already planning, sexting, fantasizing. Her move to Seattle, her stay in our home, it wasn't a matter of her needing help. It was a calculated move. 2 years of deception. 2 years of secret meetings, of coded language, of lies. So many lies. They had been carrying on right under my nose, in my home, in my bed. I closed the laptop without ordering dinner. I sat there in the dark, in his leather office chair, for what felt like hours. The silence of the house was deafening. Every happy memory I had from the past 2 years was now tainted, poisoned. Every late night at the hospital, every errand Diane ran, every shared glance I had dismissed, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. When Walter came home that night, I searched his face for any sign of the stranger I had just discovered. Some indication that the man who kissed my forehead and asked about my day was the same one who had written those messages to my sister. But he looked exactly the same. He smiled his same warm smile. His eyes held the same gentle look. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my quietness. "Rough day at work?" "Just tired," I replied, my voice sounding hollow and distant to my own ears. He nodded, completely oblivious. And as I watched him move through our home, our life, so comfortably, so easily, while maintaining this monstrous secret, I realized the man I had married didn't exist. He was a fiction. And I knew, in that moment, that just finding out wasn't enough. I wouldn't just confront them. That was their game, their narrative. No. I would do what I do best. I would document everything. For the next few weeks, I lived in a fog. I'd oscillate between a gut-wrenching, devastating pain and a strange, cold numbness. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my heart racing, the words from their emails burning in my mind. How could I have been so blind? During the day, I was a ghost, functioning on autopilot. I'd go to work, I'd make dinner, I'd have conversations that felt scripted and hollow. I was living with a perfect stranger, and I had to pretend everything was normal. A part of me, a small, desperate part, still hoped there was some explanation. Maybe it was just a fantasy. Maybe they never acted on it. But my professional habits, the ones that made me so good at my job, die hard. Almost unconsciously at first, I began to build a case. It started small. I was paying our bills online and noticed a charge on our joint credit card for a hotel downtown, the kind of boutique place people go for romantic getaways. The charge was from a Wednesday afternoon when Walter had told me he was in back-to-back surgeries all day. I saved a screenshot of the receipt. That was Exhibit A. My investigation grew more methodical. I enabled location sharing on his phone, something we'd done years ago for safety and then forgotten about. When he claimed to be working late, a quick check would show his little blue dot at a restaurant in a different neighborhood, or worse, at an address I quickly learned was Diane's new apartment. She had finally moved out a few months prior, a move I now understood was just to make their affair easier. I logged every lie. I cross-referenced his work schedule with credit card statements. I noted accidental encounters between him and Diane that seemed far too frequent to be coincidence. The evidence mounted, irrefutable and heartbreaking. They weren't just having an affair, they were extraordinarily careless about it, as if they didn't expect me to ever notice, or perhaps didn't care if I did. The lowest point came about 2 months after I found the emails. He told me he was going on a weekend medical conference in Portland. I felt that familiar cold knot in my stomach. A quick search showed no such conference was happening. On Saturday morning, I found myself sitting in my car across the street from an upscale hotel downtown, the same one from the credit card receipt. I only had to wait for 20 minutes. I saw them pull up in his car. They were laughing. He got out, went around to her side, and opened her door for her. He placed his hand on the small of her back as they walked inside, an intimate gesture I knew so well. It was like watching a scene from a movie about someone else's life. I raised my phone, my hand steady, and took the photos. Click. 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 I documented it all, adding them to my growing digital file, a secret folder on my computer labeled Case File 734. That night, Walter came home late, full of elaborate stories about the conference, the boring keynote speakers, the terrible hotel food. I just nodded, served him the reheated dinner I'd made, and listened to his fiction. "You look exhausted," I said, my eyes drawn to the faint smudge of lipstick on his collar. It was her shade. I knew it instantly. "It was intense," he agreed, reaching for my hand across the table. "But I'm home now." The tenderness of the gesture, the casual lie, the sheer audacity of it all, it nearly broke me. I gently withdrew my hand. "You should get some rest," I said. That night, as he slept soundly beside me, snoring softly, a monster in my bed, I made my decision. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of my tears or my rage. Not yet. I would continue gathering evidence. I would build my case until it was airtight, ironclad, and undeniable. And when the time came, the revelation wouldn't be a private, messy confrontation they could lie their way out of. It would be public. It would be irrefutable. And it would be completely and utterly on my terms. After 3 months of living a double life, I decided to test the waters. I needed to see how he would react, how deep the deception really went. I approached it strategically, like I would a hostile witness in an investigation. I chose a moment when he was vulnerable, tired after a long shift, slightly mellowed by a glass of wine. We were sitting on the porch swing one evening, the air cool and crisp. It was a scene straight out of our happy years. For a moment, it almost felt real. "I think we should talk about Diane," I said casually, my voice even. I felt his body tense beside me, an infinitesimal shift, but I felt it. "What about her?" he asked, his tone guarded. "I've just noticed you two seem very close lately," I said, watching his face in the dim porch light. He laughed, but the sound was slightly forced, brittle. "She's your sister, Lori." "Of course, we're close." "She's family." "No, I mean, really close, Walter," I said, turning to look him straight in the eye. I held his gaze, pouring every ounce of my silent knowledge into that look. "Is there something you want to tell me?" For a fleeting second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. A flash of panic? Recognition? Maybe even guilt. I thought, for one hopeful, foolish moment, that he might confess. That the good man I had married was still in there somewhere, buried under all the lies. Then, just as quickly, the mask slammed back into place. His expression hardened. His eyes went cold. "I don't know what you're suggesting, Lorraine, but I don't appreciate it," he said coolly, his voice dripping with condescension. "Diane is going through a lot. She leans on me sometimes for advice, as a friend, as a brother-in-law. If you're feeling insecure about something, that's on you. Maybe you should think about why you're suddenly so suspicious." Gaslighting. It was a classic, perfectly executed maneuver. The swift denial, the twisting of the narrative, the redirection of blame, casting me as the irrational, jealous wife. It was so smooth, so practiced, it almost made me doubt myself. Almost. But I had the receipts. I had the photos. I had the truth, locked away in case file 734. I just looked at him and nodded slowly. "You're right," I said quietly. "Maybe it's just me." He relaxed instantly, believing he had one. He put his arm around me and pulled me closer. "Hey," he said softly. "We're okay. You and me. Don't ever doubt that." I let him hold me, my body stiff and cold. I felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He was a manipulator. And this was no longer just about an affair. This was a war of realities, and I was the only one who knew it had already begun. My failed attempt at a gentle confrontation seemed to alert them. It was like I'd poked the hornet's nest, and now they were launching their own counteroffensive, a campaign of manipulation so breathtakingly cruel it was almost impressive. Diane started calling me more frequently. "Hey, sis. Let's get our nails done this weekend, or there's this new exhibit at the gallery, we should totally go together." Her voice was dripping with an artificial, sugary enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. She was trying to build a new narrative, one where we were the closest of sisters, to make my suspicions look even more insane. The worst was when she'd tried to set me up. We were at a gallery event, and she pulled me over to meet one of the artists, a single man. "Lorraine works so hard," she said to him, with a sympathetic little pout. "Walter and I both think she needs to get out more, have more fun." The casual cruelty of it, trying to push other men on me while she was sleeping with my husband, was staggering. She wasn't just deceiving me, she was mocking me. Meanwhile, Walter doubled down on his own deceptions. They started using my own mother as a pawn in their game. I'll never forget the day my mom called me, her voice full of excitement. "Lori, honey, I have to tell you something, but you have to pretend to be surprised," she said. "What is it, Mom?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "Well, Diane was just over here, and she let it slip that she and Walter have been planning a huge surprise for your anniversary." My blood ran cold. Our anniversary was still 4 months away. "She's been so secretive about it," my mom continued, completely oblivious. "But she mentioned they've been working on it for months, meeting up to plan all the details." "Isn't that the sweetest thing? That your sister and your husband are so close they'd do that for you? Working on it for months. Meetings. Involving my own mother in their fiction. They weren't just having an affair anymore. They were systematically rewriting our family's reality, manipulating everyone around us, isolating me in a web of their lies. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a conspiracy. That phone call crystallized something inside me. The last remnants of my grief and sadness burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard, clarifying anger. My goal was no longer just to expose them. My goal was to dismantle their entire reality, piece by piece, in front of everyone they had lied to. They wanted to control the narrative? Fine. I was about to give them a narrative they would never forget. I decided to force the issue. I was done with the subtle hints and the quiet observation. I needed to see just how far he would go. One evening, before Walter got home, I deliberately left a trail of breadcrumbs on the kitchen counter, breadcrumbs of his own betrayal. A printed copy of the hotel receipt. A few screenshots of their less explicit but still incriminating messages. I placed them next to his mail, where he couldn't possibly miss them. Then, I waited in the living room, my heart pounding, prepared for the inevitable, explosive confrontation that would finally bring everything into the open. Hours passed. I heard him come in, the jingle of his keys, the rustle of him going through the mail. Silence. A long, heavy silence. Finally, he walked into the living room. His expression wasn't angry or guilty. It was grave. Solemn. He looked like a man carrying a heavy burden. "We need to talk," he said, sitting in the armchair across from me. "Yes, we do," I agreed, a strange sense of relief washing over me. The charade was finally over. "I found something disturbing," he continued, his voice tight with what sounded like pain. He placed a folder on the coffee table between us. I reached for it, expecting to see the evidence I had left for him. Instead, I pulled out a stack of printed emails. Emails between me and a colleague from work, Russell. They were innocent messages, discussing project deadlines and technical issues. But they had been altered. He had selectively copied and pasted phrases, edited out the context, and pieced them together to make them look like flirtatious, romantic, incriminating exchanges. He had fabricated evidence of an affair to accuse me. "I know about you and Russell," Walter said, his voice thick with manufactured hurt. "How long has this been going on, Lori?" "All those late nights at the office, it all makes sense now." The moment was so surreal, so utterly diabolical, I almost laughed. It wasn't just a deflection. It was a preemptive strike. He was setting up his justification. He was creating a narrative where my imagined infidelity had tragically driven him into my sister's arms. He was making himself the victim. "There is nothing going on with Russell," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Those messages are about work, and you know it." "They seem pretty intimate to me," he countered, shaking his head sadly. I can't believe you would do this to us." The calculated nature of it chilled me to the bone. In that moment, I understood. Direct confrontation would never work. He and Diane had invested too much in their lies. They would deny, deflect, and distort the truth until their fiction became the accepted reality. They would burn me to the ground to save themselves. "I think," he said, reaching for my hand with practiced concern, "we should take some time apart. This isn't healthy for either of us." Relief flooded his face when I didn't pull away. I played my part. I let him hold my hand. "Time apart might be good," I agreed, my voice a whisper. He squeezed my hand, a look of profound sympathy on his face. "This isn't about blame," he said, the master manipulator at work. "Sometimes people just grow apart." He paused, then delivered the final, perfectly planned line. I'll stay with Diane for a while we figure things out." She offered her guest room when I told her about the situation. Of course, she had. Their whole plan was falling into place perfectly. He thought my quiet acquiescence meant surrender. He thought he had won. He was gravely mistaken. As he sat there, basking in his own cleverness, I was already mentally shifting to a new phase of my investigation. The game had changed. And they had no idea of the hell I was about to unleash. The day Walter moved his things out was one of the strangest days of my life. He packed a few suitcases, whistling a cheerful tune, acting as if this were a perfectly normal, amicable separation. Diane came over to help, giving me these pitying, sympathetic looks that made me want to scream. They were so confident in their little drama, so sure of their script. "Just take all the time you need, sis," she said, giving me a tight, false hug. The moment their car pulled away, I took a personal day from work. While they believed I was at home, wallowing in my grief, I was driving downtown. My destination was the office of a man named Mitchell Vance, a private investigator a colleague had once recommended. He was a gruff, no-nonsense ex-cop who specialized in infidelity cases and had testified in hundreds of divorce proceedings. I sat across from him at his cluttered desk and laid out my files. Not suspicions, not theories. A complete case file. He reviewed my documentation, the timelines, the financial records, the location data, the photos, with a low whistle of impressed surprise. "Ma'am," he said, looking at me over his reading glasses. "Most clients come to me with a hunch and a handful of blurry photos. You've brought me a complete prosecution." "It's what I do for a living," I replied. Just not usually in my personal life. I'm not looking to hire you for surveillance. I need a professional assessment. What do I have, and what else do I need? He confirmed what I already suspected. My evidence was compelling, but a skilled lawyer could potentially explain away individual pieces. The hotel stay? A business trip he shared a ride for. The late nights near her apartment? He was helping her fix a leaky faucet. Intent, Vance said, tapping a thick finger on the folder. Intent is what you need. If you can prove they deliberately planned to deceive you and others, it strengthens your position considerably. It's not just about the affair, it's about the conspiracy. I left his office with a renewed sense of purpose. My next stop was the most respected divorce attorney in Seattle, a sharp, elegant woman named Kathleen Price. She reviewed my evidence with a cool, clinical precision. "This is exceptional documentation, Lorraine," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "Most clients bring me tissues and accusations. You've brought receipts, literal and figurative. What can I expect?" I asked. "A favorable settlement, certainly," she explained. "But you need to understand, Washington is a no-fault state. The court won't punish them for the affair itself. Legally, their deception has limited impact on the division of assets unless you can prove financial fraud. I'm not looking for legal punishment," I clarified, my voice hard as steel. "I'm not looking for more money. I want the truth to be recognized. I want their narrative dismantled. I want everyone to see them for who they really are." Kathleen studied me thoughtfully for a long moment. Then she gave me a small, knowing smile. "Well," she said, leaning back in her chair, "the court of public opinion can often be far more punishing than any legal judgment." Her words were like a lightning bolt. A public fiction deserves a public truth. And I knew, with absolute certainty, how and when I was going to present it. Armed with professional advice, I expanded my investigation. This was no longer just about documenting the affair, it was about exposing the intent, the conspiracy. And what I found was so much worse than I could have imagined. The first big break came from our joint savings account. I noticed a series of regular, identical withdrawals made over the past year. They were disguised as cash withdrawals for household expenses. But when I dug deeper, I found they corresponded with deposits of the exact same amounts into a private account Walter had opened without my knowledge. He had been systematically draining our future to fund his new life. It was financial infidelity on top of everything else. This wasn't just a betrayal of my heart, it was a betrayal of our shared life, our partnership. The dream of retirement, of travel, of security, he was stealing it from me. But the most stunning, most soul-crushing discovery came from his cloud storage. Like many people, his phone automatically backed up everything: photos, notes, and text messages. He had never been very tech-savvy, and he'd completely forgotten about it. One night, armed with a password I'd known for years, I logged in. And I found their private conversations. Reading their texts was like pouring acid into my soul. They discussed me in cruel, dismissive terms. They mocked my trust, my work, my personality. They laughed about how oblivious I was. I'll never forget one exchange. It seared into my brain. Walter had written, "She's so caught up in her work, she hasn't noticed a thing. We could probably do it on the kitchen counter while she's typing away in the office and she'd never know." Diane's reply came a minute later, LOL. "She'll probably thank us for making the decision for her. She never really knew how to be a proper wife anyway. Always so serious. She never really knew how to be a proper wife." The words echoed in the silent room. All the years I had supported his demanding career, managed our home, celebrated his every promotion, cared for him when he was sick, all of it was reduced to that. A joke. A failure. Reading their casual cruelty transformed something within me. The numbness that had protected me for months shattered, and in its place was a cold, clarifying rage. This wasn't just betrayal. This was systematic emotional abuse. It was a coordinated effort to undermine my reality, to paint me as a fool, to preserve their own selfish self-image as two people who just fell in love. I meticulously saved every single message. Every financial transaction. Every lie. My case file was no longer just about an affair. It was about a calculated, malicious campaign of deception and cruelty. Divorce was inevitable, but it would happen on my terms. And the court of public opinion was about to be called into session. Just as I was finishing compiling my evidence, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. My heart hammered against my ribs. Family dinner at our house this Sunday. It's your father's 65th birthday. Andrew and Diane both confirmed. Please come, honey. Don't make it awkward for your father. Don't make it awkward. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. But as I read the message, a slow smile spread across my face. They had no idea. They had just handed me the perfect stage. The perfect audience. All the players would be gathered in one room, expecting me to be the sad, pitiful wife, the awkward third wheel in their blossoming love story. They were expecting me to follow their script. I spent the next 3 days in a state of intense, focused preparation. I was no longer a wife or a sister. I was a prosecutor preparing for the most important trial of my life. I didn't just dump all the evidence into one massive file. That would be messy, overwhelming. I tailored my presentation. I created separate, curated emails for each key family member. For my father, a practical, no-nonsense man, I compiled the financial evidence. I included the statements from our joint savings account alongside the statements from Walter's secret account, highlighting the dates he had borrowed money from my father for a smart investment while simultaneously diverting our funds. For my mother, a woman who valued family loyalty above all else, I focused on Diane's deception. I included screenshots of texts where Diane used helping mom with errands as an alibi for meeting Walter. I included the conversation about the anniversary surprise, showing how they had used my mother's love and trust as a tool in their lives. For my aunts, uncles, and my cousin Russell, I documented the specific, individual lies told to each of them, showing a pattern of manipulation that affected the entire family. The final touch was a master email, a complete dossier sent only to myself. It contained everything, the complete timeline, every piece of financial and digital evidence, and a detailed, dispassionate account of my discovery process. This would be my reference, my script, during the inevitable chaos that would follow my revelation. On Sunday morning, I woke up with a strange and profound sense of serenity. There was no anxiety, no fear. Only purpose. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue dress that Walter had always said he loved. I styled my hair, applied light makeup, and put on the pearl earrings my grandmother had left me in her will. A small piece of her strength, a little piece of my own family inheritance. As I was about to leave, my phone chimed with a text from Diane. Just checking you're still coming tonight. Dad would be heartbroken if you didn't show. We're all family, after all. Let's not make it weird. Smiley face. The casual, breathtaking audacity of it almost broke my composure. I took a deep breath, my hand resting on the door handle. In a few hours, their carefully constructed fiction would collapse under the weight of irrefutable, documented truth. I texted back a single word. Coming. I arrived at my parents' home precisely on time, bearing a homemade carrot cake, my father's favorite, and a carefully wrapped gift. As I stepped inside, the familiar sounds and smells of the family gathering enveloped me. For a moment, it was like any other Sunday. But I knew it wasn't. It was the end of an era. Walter and Diane were already there, seated side by side on the sofa in the living room. It was the first time they had been so openly a couple in a family setting. They were testing the waters, gauging the reaction. They looked up as I came in, their faces a mixture of pity and apprehension. My mother greeted me with a tight, worried hug. Oh, Lorraine, I'm so glad you came, she whispered. This means so much to your father. Dinner proceeded with an excruciating, painful normalcy. We ate my mother's pot roast. We discussed safe topics, the weather, my cousin's new baby, my father's retirement plans. I participated mechanically, a ghost at the feast, watching Walter and Diane exchange small, secret smiles across the table. They were just waiting for their moment, the moment they had planned and rehearsed. As my mother began serving dessert, it came. Walter cleared his throat and tapped his spoon against his wine glass. The room fell silent. It was the exact gesture he'd used for every major announcement in our life together, our engagement, our first home, his last promotion. Moments that had once filled me with pride now felt like steps in a long, elaborate lie. He began his speech, the one I knew was coming. Words about difficult decisions, about unexpected love, about not being able to control who your heart chooses. As he spoke, I felt a buzz from my phone in my purse. I glanced down discreetly. It was an alert from my email scheduling system. Delivery failed. Server error. A jolt of pure panic shot through me. I quickly checked the status. The carefully timed emails, the foundation of my entire plan, had not been sent. A temporary server outage. Estimated recovery time, unknown. My blood ran cold. My entire plan hinged on those emails. Without them, I was exactly what they expected me to be, the blindsided, pitiful wife, with no proof, no power, just a crazy story they could easily dismiss. Walter was reaching the climax of his speech, his hand now openly holding Diane's across the table. My family watched them, their expressions ranging from shock to discomfort to pity for me. I had seconds to decide. Walk out in defeat? Confront them with nothing but my word against theirs? Neither was an option. And then I remembered. Plan B. I had brought my laptop in my bag, just in case. All the evidence, the entire case file, was organized and ready. As Walter uttered the final words, "Diane and I have fallen in love," and every eye in the room swiveled toward me, waiting for my collapse, I was already moving. With calm, steady determination, I reached into my bag, opened my laptop under the table, navigated to my email program, attached the master file with every single piece of evidence, and added every family member's address to the recipient line. As the stunned silence in the room stretched on, I pressed send. Then I looked up, met my husband's confident gaze, and spoke into the silence. "Please, everyone," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised even me. "Check your emails right now." The choreography of the next few moments was almost beautiful. A succession of chimes and buzzes echoed around the table as my email arrived. Confused glances were exchanged. My cousin Russell was the first to open it, his eyes widening as he scrolled. "I've prepared some additional context for Walter's announcement," I explained calmly, as Walter's smile finally vanished, replaced by a look of dawning horror. "Just some documentation I thought everyone should have." My father was next. His face darkened into a thundercloud as he scrolled through his phone. "Holy hell," Russell whispered under his breath. My mother set her phone down with trembling hands, her eyes darting between Diane and me, disbelief and horror warring on her face. What is this? What have you done?" Diane hissed at me, her face draining of all color. Walter fumbled for his own phone. "It's the truth," I replied simply. "Everything. The complete history of your relationship with my sister, all organized for clarity. Hotel receipts, text messages, financial records. It's all there." The room had fallen into a new kind of silence. Not the silence of shock, but the heavy, ringing silence of revelation. It was broken only by the occasional gasp or muttered curse as someone reached another damning piece of evidence. "These are private conversations." Walter finally sputtered, scrolling frantically through the text messages, his planned narrative of star-crossed lovers disintegrating with each swipe. "You had no right. This is an invasion of privacy." Actually, I interrupted, my voice as cool and clinical as if I were testifying in court. Washington is a one-party consent state. Our shared financial accounts were just that, shared. And most of this information was gathered from devices and accounts you left open and logged into, often in our shared home. It's called digital forensics, Walter. It's my literal profession. I turned my gaze to the room. You plan to announce this tonight, I said, my voice steady and strong. You choreographed this moment to control the narrative. The reluctant lovers, the difficult decision, the clean break. You just didn't expect me to have a narrative of my own. My mother found her voice first. She turned to my sister, her face pale, her voice trembling with a fury I had never heard from her before. Diane? How could you do this? To your own sister? Diane crumpled, resorting to tears, her go-to strategy her entire life. I never meant to hurt anyone, she sobbed. It just happened. You can't control who you fall in love with. According to your texts, you've been planning this for over 2 years, my cousin Russell interjected, holding up his phone, his face a mask of disgust. That's not just happening. That's a plan. The chorus of condemnation grew. My Aunt Patricia was comforting my mother, who was now staring at Diane as if she were a stranger. My Uncle James, a retired accountant, was grilling a stunned Walter about the financial discrepancies, the secret bank account. Walter made one last, desperate attempt at damage control, trying to put on his doctor's coat of authority. This is clearly Lorraine's way of processing a difficult transition, he said, adopting a clinical, condescending tone. She's created this elaborate. Stop talking, Walter, my father's voice cut through the air like a razor. It was ice cold. He stood up, his presence filling the room. My daughter doesn't fabricate evidence. The battle was over. The truth had won. After months of documentation, analysis, and preparation, there was nothing more I needed to say. The evidence spoke for itself. I gathered my purse and my coat and stood up. I should go, I said quietly into the tense silence. Dad, I'm so sorry about your birthday dinner. My father was by my side in an instant. I'll walk you out, he said, his arm wrapping firmly around my shoulders. Outside, in the cool night air, he hugged me fiercely. I had no idea what you've been going through, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Why didn't you tell us sooner? I needed to understand it all first myself, I explained, leaning into his embrace. And I needed everyone else to understand it, too. Not just believe my word against theirs. I needed them to see the truth. As I got into my car and drove away, my phone, which I had put on silent, lit up with a relentless stream of messages from family. Messages of support, of shock, of solidarity. I turned the phone off, welcoming the quiet. For the first time in 6 months, I felt a profound sense of peace. The war was over. You know, as I was driving away from that house, from the wreckage of my old life, I felt this incredible sense of release. It was the first time I could breathe freely in so long. And I know some of you listening know exactly what that feeling is like. If you are still here, listening to my story, it means the world to me. It makes me feel a little less alone in all of this. If you could, please help me out by liking this video and just commenting with the number 1 down below. It lets me know that you gave me a like, and it tells me that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you could ever know. So please, just comment with the number 1, and let me tell you how this story ends. The next morning, I filed for divorce. The legal process was surprisingly swift. With the mountain of evidence I had, there was no fight. Walter and Diane's attempts to control the narrative had collapsed completely, not in a messy, he said she said battle, but through the quiet, methodical presentation of truth. They were ostracized by the family. My mother, heartbroken, told Diane she needed a long time before she could even look at her again. My father refused to speak to Walter. Their grand love story had become a cautionary tale of deceit. 3 months later, as I sat in my lawyer Kathleen's office signing the final divorce papers, she asked if I felt satisfied with the outcome. "I don't feel satisfaction," I replied honestly, looking down at my signature on the page that officially ended my marriage. "I just feel clarity." I had built a career uncovering the digital evidence of human behavior. I never imagined my greatest case would be documenting the unraveling of my own life. But in the end, the tools of my trade were the tools of my salvation. Methodical documentation had accomplished what emotional confrontation never could. It had replaced deception with irrefutable truth. That evening, I packed the last of my belongings from the house we had built together. The craftsman bungalow that had once been my dream home now felt like a mausoleum of dead memories. I didn't feel sad. I just felt done. I moved into a new apartment, a small, bright space overlooking Puget Sound. As the sun set over the water, casting a golden glow across my empty living room, I sat on the floor with my laptop. I opened case file 734 one last time, looked at the folders filled with pain and betrayal, and I dragged the entire file into the trash bin. Then, I emptied the trash. It was the final step in a process that had consumed nearly a year of my life. Tomorrow would be the first page of a new chapter, one written entirely in my own hand, on my own terms. And as I watched the boats glide across the water, I knew, with a certainty that filled my entire being, that I was going to be okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my whole story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sharing it helps. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this resonated with you, please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. You are not alone. And remember, no matter how dark things get, you always have the strength to find your own truth. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.